Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Maisie and this is Maisie with a Z, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in June. So this was a pretty good reading month for me. I read 14 books and I don't believe I gave any of them less than 3.5 stars. So that's overall pretty decent. For a Storygraph, I read 4,842 pages. So I feel like that's pretty good. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get on to the books that I read. Okay, so the first book that I read this month was Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker. This was a really cute graphic novel about a witch who lives in a town and is being raised by two grandmothers, I think, and her childhood best friend comes back into town. The childhood best friend is a werewolf who's investigating this mystery in the town woods, and so witch girl, whose name I'm blanking on, decides to help her, and they kind of like solve the mystery together. One thing I really loved about this was the art style was so cute. It was like, I absolutely loved it. I think the story was a little weaker. Like, it was pretty good. I was very into it. It was a very quick read. The story was okay. I think I would have liked a little more world building and context and a little more depth to the plot. I also would have liked a little more of the romance subplot. There's less of a main pairing between the werewolf and witch, but I feel like considering the two main characters, and there aren't that many other characters, the plot is good, the romance is good, the artwork is beautiful. I just wish the plot and romance had a little bit more depth and a little bit more detail and backstory and build up. But it was still a really fun, quick read. I would still definitely recommend it, especially for someone looking for either sapphic graphic novels or for autumnal witchy graphic novels or quick reads for around October. I think it's still definitely very much worth a read. And I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next 2 books I read were Once Upon a Broken Heart and The Ballad of Never After, both by Stephanie Garber, where I had read Once Upon a Broken Heart when it came out back in fall of 2021, and then Ballad of Never After had been sitting on my TBR since it came out. So I eventually decided to reread Once Upon a Broken Heart before I jumped into The Ballad of Never After, and I had forgotten how much I loved this book. Like, I gave it 5 stars originally, but since I reread it and read Ballad of Never After, I've not stopped thinking about these books. They are absolutely new favorite series for me. Like, I had loved Stephanie Garber's Carval series, but not to this extent. I cannot wait for A Curse for True Love to come out this fall, which is the 3rd and final book in the trilogy. The world is so magical and whimsical, and it deals a lot with like the power of stories, and it's so, I can't begin to explain it, but it feels like reading a fairy tale while also dealing a lot with the concept of fairy tales. I love the main character, Evangeline. I'm so into the romance when I thought I was not going to be into the romance. After having read Carval, I thought I wasn't going to like this main pairing, but I do. And oh my god, I can't recommend this duology enough. I'd say you probably don't have to have read Carval before it, but I think it helps. Like, it gives some backstory to the world and to the main characters. But oh my god, I love these books. I need to stop myself before I go on about them for the entirety of the video. But oh my god, they're so good. I love them. I finished them and immediately wanted to reread them. If you like enemies to lovers, if you like fairy tale type fantasy books, if you just really want a good romance fantasy storyline, this is it. I just love it. I love villain turned kind of anti-hero love interest, and Evangeline being absolutely amazing. It's just so good. Okay, I'll stop. But both absolute 5 out of 5 stars. Would give them higher if I could. I would give them 10 out of 5. If that was a rating, then that's what these would get. Absolute new favorite series. Which, it's so strange because, again, I had read this a year and a half ago, and I liked it, but it did not stick out to me that much. It's just like, I'm getting emotional thinking about how much I love these books. And that is really all I have to say about them. And next up was another reread, which was Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. Shadowhunters has been one of my favorite series for years and years and years. And this is the 2nd book in the Last Hours, which is the 4th Shadowhunter series. And it's possibly my favorite one. Before this, my favorite had been The Infernal Devices, which was Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Prince, and Clockwork Princess. This series follows the children of that series, and it's just, I've only read the first 2 books so far. As I said in my last video, the 3rd one is on my July TBR, but I adored this book. I loved rereading it, and I'm so excited to get to the 3rd one. I'm very much hoping that the 3rd one is going to live up to the hype I've built up for myself about it, from the first 2 books, where I've heard mixed reviews of it. I've heard a lot of people who were, like me, were extremely excited for the 3rd book, who have since said it didn't really live up to their expectations, but I've also heard people say they really enjoyed it. So we'll see how that works out. But Chain of Iron, absolutely loved. 5 out of 5 stars again. And then the next book I read was If You Still Recognize Me by Cynthia So, which I'd received an e-arc of through NetGalley, and it came out in May. And I lost track of time with school and such, so I didn't end up reading it until this month. It's contemporary romance set in the UK. It's set in the UK. I don't exactly remember where. So If You Still Recognize Me is contemporary romance set in the UK. It's set in the main character Elsie's final summer before going to university. There's some various things going on in her life. One is she is planning a weekend trip with her best friend and needs to get a job in order to pay for that. So she ends up getting her job at her local comic shop because she's super into this one comic and wants to get more into comics, and she gets a job there. And meanwhile, she's had this long-standing crush on this internet friend of hers that she met through the fandom for that comic series. And she's planning on this summer will finally be the one where she tells her how she feels. Where they text and call every day, they're very close, it's just she's not told her internet friend how she feels. And internet friend lives in the US. Well, Elsie, the main character, lives in the UK. And then aside from all of this, Elsie's grandmother has just come to stay with her family from Hong Kong, where she had not seen her grandmother in years and years and years, because there had been some estrangement between the grandparents and her parents and uncle and aunt. But when her grandfather died, then the grandmother came to go stay with Elsie's parents. And then, separately from all of that, but entangled with each of those threads, is Elsie's childhood best friend, Joan, comes back from Hong Kong, where she's been living for like 7 or 8 years. Elsie had completely lost contact with her. Joan never responded to any of her emails or anything. But they reconnect and slowly grow closer throughout the summer. So there's kind of a love triangle thing where Elsie has feelings for her internet friend, but also has developing feelings for her childhood best friend, Joan. And that's the main plot of the book, but it's also a lot about Elsie coming into her own and expressing herself without fear of what her parents will think of her or anything. I did enjoy the book. I just, if you go bare bone structure, there are so many elements that I did really like. I liked her friendship with her best friend who she was going on a trip with. I really liked the fandom discussion, and so I thought those aspects were good. I really wanted to like the romance, but I couldn't really bring myself to for a couple of reasons. One is Elsie had absolutely no chemistry with Joan, in my opinion. I just did not see it, so that was a big issue. And Elsie also doesn't gradually develop feelings, she just suddenly gets them. It's just, I thought the romance could have been a lot better. I don't know. I thought she had more chemistry with the internet friend, and I kind of knew they were never actually going to get together. The plot was also quite predictable in virtually every way, but it was still a good book. I still enjoyed it, and I gave it 3.5 stars. And the next up is Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune, where The House in the Cerulean Sea had been one of my absolute favorite books of last year. It's still probably one of my favorite books. I want to reread that book. I should reread that this summer. But this is by the same author. It follows the main character Wallace, who has spent his entire life super dedicated to his work. It's his entire life. He has no time for anything else. He does not care about anything else. And then one day he gets a heart attack at work and he dies. And he's sitting at a funeral as a ghost when a reaper comes to connect him and tells him he's dead. He ends up staying at this tea shop run by a man named Hugo that's kind of a crossing place between life and death, where ghosts can sort of process and come to terms with their death, and then eventually they're supposed to accept it and choose to go through this door in the ceiling that brings them to the next place. And this was just such an amazing book. It was so cozy and so cute. I loved Wallace's relationships with all the other characters. I loved his character development. The romance between him and Hugo, absolutely adorable. I loved his friendship with Hugo's grandfather, who's also a ghost there, as well as the Reaper May, and I just read this book. It is so good. It is about grief and coming to terms with death, and it's about finding meaning, and I adored it. I cannot recommend it enough. T.J. Klune is an absolute favorite author of mine at this point. Like, this absolutely cemented it. I don't think anyone but TJ Klune could come up with this. It's just amazing. The line on the back of the book is, hilarious, haunting, and kind. Under the Whispering Door is an uplifting story about a life spent at the office and a death spent building a home. And I don't think there's a better way to describe it. It's really about like him building connections with these other people in his death that he never really made in life, and learning to value that and learning to be a better person. And it was so good. Read it. It's great. Absolute 5 out of 5 stars. I told you this was a good reading month for me. Next up is Super Mutant Magic Academy by Jillian Tamaki, where this is a collection of comics from the series, where it's set at this magic boarding school, and there's a group of repeating characters, but there's also like some one-off comics that don't follow characters that appear other places. It was a really fun time. I really enjoyed it. I didn't really know what to expect going in, but you really grow to care for the characters, even though there's not a super distinct plot line or anything. There's still some development. It has some interesting existential perspectives, and it was just a fun time. I don't really know how to describe it. It does read like a collection of comic strips, but it cares a lot more about the coming of age aspects of finishing school and adolescence and like, you know, that all of that YA coming of age sort of themes. Like, this has that. Don't come to this book expecting serious plot, because you're not getting that. You're getting very little plot at all. But it's a good time. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is another love of my life. I was not expecting to love this book so much. This is The Midnight Girls by Alicia Jasinska, I think it's pronounced. I should probably look that up later. It's set in a Polish-inspired historical fantasy world where the main 3 characters are witches. Each of them is a human girl who is abandoned by their parents or was dying or something, and they were taken in by one of these witches. So one of the witches is like associated with morning, one is associated with midday, and one is associated with night. Our 2 main characters are Marinka, who is like the protege of the midday witch, and Zosha, who is night. The 2 of them have had this rivalry for years where the witches send their apprentices / proteges out to collect the hearts of princes and bring them back to them. And when they eat them, then depending on the personality of the prince, they get different benefits. One type of prince gives longer life, one type of prince gives increased magic, and I don't remember what the 3rd type of prince does. And so these 3 girls have been like vying with each other to try and get the prince's hearts for years, and that's how they've been raised. And Marinka is friends with Beata, who is the apprentice of the Morning Witch. They don't have the same rivalry that Marinka has with Zosha. Basically, this book is set around, there's this carnival season where 3 of them are all set to get the same prince's heart, and Beata and Marinka are teamed up together. They end up sharing a carriage with Zosha accidentally. Zosha doesn't know that they're witches, and they don't know that Zosha is. Eventually learn of each other's identities. Even though they spend their entire life in these rivalries, their curiosity is now piqued about each other, where Zosha and Marinka can't help but feel drawn to each other. And it's just such a cute romance between these like monster girls who are trying to decide if it's worth getting away from the abusive situations they've been in their entire lives and risking everything they've ever known to try and find some sort of actual happiness and power over themselves. And the romance is so cute. It's such good enemies to lovers. I can't recommend it enough. I gave it 4.5 stars. It just didn't really feel up to like the full 5 stars for me. I'm not totally sure why. I think it might be just like some of the side characters felt a little strange, and I would have really loved if this book could have been like 100 pages longer. Thoroughly enjoyed it. We don't get enough enemy to lover sapphic witch romance books, and this I think really does a good job, and I never see it talked about, so if you're remotely interested, give it a try. And the next book I read was Loveless by Alice Oseman, which was probably the biggest surprise of the month, because I did not go into it expecting to like it much at all. I've read all the volumes of Heartstopper that are currently out, and they're not for me. Like, I mean, I enjoy the process of reading them. I just feel like the characters didn't have enough depth. I understand why the kind of like feel good aspects of it are things that other people really enjoy about it, I just found it really did not work for me. So I did go into Loveless with super high hopes about like character depth or anything. But I ended up absolutely adoring it. It was the best asexual rep I've ever read. It's about this main character who goes to university, and it's kind of about her journey of gradually coming to terms with her aromantic asexual identity, which she hadn't really realized was a thing up until then. But it's also a lot about her friendships, and it's very much coming of age, and it was so good. But I only gave it 4.5 stars, again, because even though I absolutely loved the rep and it felt so comforting and so great, I just feel like the characters needed more depth. Like, it's again a thing with Alice Oseman where the characters just don't feel like people to me. They just feel like, they don't feel like they have their own distinct personalities necessarily. I don't really know how to describe it. Or I think it's just a thing for me with Alice Oseman's writing. But regardless, I did still really enjoy it. If you like Alice Oseman, then you'll obviously like it. But even if you don't, then I definitely give it a try. Again, best ace rep I've seen in any books, really. And yeah, can't recommend that enough. Hopefully I'll get a physical copy soon. I read this as an ebook because, again, I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not. But because I loved it, then I'm hopefully going to get a copy. Next up was Crown of Gilded Bones, which is the third book in the From Blood and Ash series. I gave it 4 stars, I think. I can't say that much about it because it's the third book in the series. I can't say anything without spoiling the first 2 books. But the series is one of the most addictive things I've ever read in my life. Like, I don't know what Jennifer L. Armentrout puts in these books, but I cannot stop reading them once I read them. I will say, I feel like the first 2 books were better than this third book. I think it dragged on a little too long. And I understand why, like, when she's making cuts in the plot of the series, why she's cutting off the books where they are. Like, it makes sense that the ending of this book was the end of the book at the start of the next book. I just wish there'd been a little more in here because a lot of it felt like filler. Like, it's very much fantasy romance. Like, the fantasy plot is not why anyone is reading these books. But I just wish there had been a little more plot to them. Even the romance aspect, I feel like, was a little lost in this book. So I gave the first 2 books 5 stars, I think. Not because they were amazing literature, but because I really enjoyed them. But this one I only give 4 stars because even though it still had the addictive quality and I really enjoyed reading them, I just felt like it lacked a lot of qualities of the first 2 books. I just got the first book in the companion series, which you're supposed to read before you read the 4th book in From Blood and Ash, in on Libby, so I'm hopefully going to read that in the next few weeks. And so I guess you'll see what I think of that in my next monthly wrap up. And also, sorry, it's getting dark. I'm trying to finish filming this before a storm comes in. But next up was A Tale of Two Cities, where I have a lot to say about this book. This is one of the most beat-up books I own, and that's because we have been through a lot. I bought this in the summer of 2018, 5 years ago. I was doing an art program in Cleveland, and I ran out of books to read, and so I kind of went down to the college bookstore for the program I was doing it at, and there was not that much to choose from, and I ended up choosing Tale of Two Cities. And I did not finish it then. I read maybe a couple of chapters. But since then, this book has been on so many trips with me where I was convinced I was absolutely going to read it this time, and I didn't. But this past time was, I think, the 3rd time I tried finishing it, and I started it last July and read about half of it, and then barely touched it for a year, and then I finished the last half of it in a couple of hours one afternoon, which really made me feel stupid for how long I'd been putting it off. But despite all the hardship, despite all the procrastination, despite it having taken me almost 5 years to read this book, I loved it. It's 5 stars. I loved the characters. It was my first Charles Dickens book, and I just adored it. I wasn't expecting it to like it this much. Once I got through the first third, I think, though, it was amazing, and it had so much. Like, I was not expecting the depth of these characters. I was not expecting all these ideas around forgiveness and what makes life worth it. And I really enjoyed it. And now I want to reread it, which I'm not going to try and do anytime soon because I don't need this sitting on my TBR for another 5 years. But I am going to try and pick up more Dickens books at some point. I still have quite a few classics I own that I would like to get through first. The last 2 Jane Austen books I haven't read, the last couple Bronte books, and Anna Karenina, and a couple of others that I'd like to get through before I buy more Dickens books to read, but I'm really looking forward to doing that when I finally have shelf space and such, you know? Next book I read was Going Bicoastal, which is another arc, which is by Dahlia Adler and came out on the 13th of June, I think. Yeah, I think the 13th of June. And it's the sliding doors romance about a girl who has divorced parents. Her mother's lived in LA since she was young, and she's grown up with her father in New York. And for the summer, she's kind of getting this opportunity where she can either go take an internship at her mother's company in LA, or she can stay in New York with her dad. It basically follows her, and she goes both places. One, she develops a romance with this girl who she's seen around her neighborhood for about a year and had a crush on, but never actually asked out. While in the other, she starts dating the other intern at the company. The two sides of the book are defined by, the LA side's very defined by food, where the boy wants to be a chef, but had a lot of instability growing up, so kind of wants a very secure job. While the New York side, the girl that she ends up dating is very into music, and they go to a lot of concerts and stuff, and that was a big marker of like the tone of the two different sides. But it was really interesting seeing like how different aspects of the book paralleled each other in the alternate timelines. Okay, I've turned on the light to try and clear up the dimness from the storm. What I will say about the book is both of the romance plotlines are very cute, except because of the sliding door nature, then they both feel very truncated and abbreviated. It's a 330-page book, while a usual contemporary romance would have all those 330 pages for the main couple. Because this is split between two timelines, then neither side really gets the development that I would really like them to have. So I kind of wish it had been a little longer. I was not expecting to like the sliding doors format. I tried reading a book like that in the past, and I DNF'd it a little bit in because I could not get on board with it. But here I thought it was done very well. It was always very clear which timeline you're following, and it was very easy to keep them straight. Yeah, I think the author did a really good job balancing that. I just think due to the nature of the format, then the romances and each side lost something because they were splitting so much time. Another issue is I felt like there were too many side characters in both sides, where there were maybe 5 or 6 side characters at least in each timeline who were all just like generically friends with Natalia, who's the main character, and whatever love interest is in that timeline. And it is very hard to keep them all straight, especially since it was only like 115 pages for each timeline. Or, sorry, that was not correct math. Only like 160 pages for each timeline. So those I'd say were the main issues, and those are why I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 instead of a 4.5 or 5 stars. And then next up is Heir of Fire, which is the 3rd book in my reading/rereading Throne of Glass. I had read Throne of Glass through Queen of Shadows a couple of years ago and never finished the series, so now I'm rereading the first 5 books in order to read the last 3 books, which doesn't bother me at all because I do really like the series. I don't know why I didn't finish it the first time. And this is the 3rd book. Absolutely loved it. 5 stars. It introduces Manon, who is my absolute favorite character in the series. She's a witch. She is absolutely amazing. I adore her. Probably my favorite character Sarah J. Maas has made. Her POV is easily my favorite part of the book, although I will say I don't think there's any weak POVs here. Except for maybe Kale. I don't like Kale. He's not a good character. I don't like him. I know he's controversial in the character and some people do like him. I'm not one of them. I don't like him. He's not bad, or he makes bad decisions, but I think a lot of the issue is just he's not as good as the other characters. I adore each and every one of the characters in this book. I don't like him. Everyone else makes up for it, and I'm super excited to read Assassin's Blade and hopefully at least Queen of Shadows this month. Sorry for the thunder. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'm just trying to reread it as quickly as possible because I'd really like to get through all of her series before the 3rd Crescent City book comes out. So that means finishing Throne of Glass and then rereading the first 2 books of ACOTAR, and then reading for the first time the last 3 books of ACOTAR, and then reading the first 2 Crescent City books, which is very doable. Like, I read a lot in a year. It's just a matter of getting through the books while balancing them with reading reading other things, since I don't really want to read just Sarah J. Maas for a month. I feel like this is where the series actually becomes what it is, where it's less just about Selena. For one, Selena very much comes into her own and moves past a lot of what was holding her back in the first 2 books. but also all of the other characters get introduced and start getting their own parts in the story, and it's just so good. And you kind of begin to see what the overarching big plot of the story is. Like, I enjoy the first 2 books in the series, but this is so much better. So yes, 5 stars. And then the final book that I read this month was Linked Planet's People by Molly Naylor and Lizzie Stewart, where this is a graphic novel and it's based on a play by Molly Naylor. It follows this main character who's an astronomer, but she's also dealing with anxiety and bipolar disorder. It's lovely. It has beautiful illustrations. Look at this. I really enjoyed the main character's development. There's some graphic novels I think are equivalent to like full novels. This is more equivalent to like a short story, but it's really lovely. It's a quick read, a beautiful story about mental health and not being able to expect people to understand the reasons behind your behaviors if you don't tell them, and learning to communicate, and it was just gorgeous. I really loved it, and I'm glad I read it this month. And again, 5 stars. I've said that a lot this video. So yeah, that's all the books that I read in June. Again, it was a really good reading month. I loved almost all the books that I read. They were all extremely good times, and I'm really excited to see what July has in store for me, because it has a lot of books that I was really anticipating, and I'm hoping it turns out to be an even better reading month than June was. That about concludes the video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you later.